If you have been enjoying Edinburgh Business Stories and you want to keep up to date with some of the new episodes we've got coming out every other week, then why not subscribe? The stories, the guests we have are absolutely incredible and we wouldn't want you to miss out. Tommy, great to have you on.
Thanks very much. Thanks for asking me to be here.
Yeah, so give us a little bit of context who you are and what your businesses are.
My name's Tommy Dale. I'm a womble, I'm a composter, and I'm involved with a few companies and environmental charity based in the Lothians. The day job is running Fourth Source Management. I'm managing director, been involved since we founded the company back in 2002. So we've grown over the years. So we've got 10 sites across Scotland now, between East Lothian and Ayrshire and the Borders and Perthshire. We've got an amazing team of around 60 folk. And our products that we sell under the Caledonian Horticulture range are made from garden cuttings collected from councils and landscapers across Scotland.
Amazing. So let's go back to the beginning. How did this all come about?
So our family are farmers. We farmed down at Old Hame, just near Tintagel Castle, near North Berwick, since 1834. And I went to agriculture college in Edinburgh after finishing school. Always wanted to get into farming. At the time, I was also a fisherman. My dad ended up being a lobster fisherman. And so grew up catching lobsters. Got my first boat at 16. So I was fishing for lobsters, but going to agriculture college. And I wanted to stay in East Lothian. And one day our lecturer said, right, we're going to do a wee project on a diversification. We're going to give you a wee imaginary farm. It's not big enough to make a living from. Try and come up with an idea of something that would make that business viable. So I went down to the library at Scottish Agricultural College at King's Buildings in Edinburgh, and I read this little article about a chap outside London, and he had a wee holding, tiny wee place, and he was charging landscapers as they left the city at night to drop off all their garden cuttings. And he was mulching them up quite crudely into a compost and a mulch, and he was selling it back to the same guys in the spring. And I just thought, that's amazing. You know, you're working with nature, you're doing good environmentally, and you're making money, you're getting paid at both ends. So that was my project. And the lecturers were fantastic. They were so supportive, and one of them, David Wiley, said, you need to think outside the box. And so that, it gave us the opportunity not just to focus on thinking, we can maybe grow a different variety of tatty. You could do something completely different on the farm. So that's all right. I can maybe actually try this, because I didn't want to leave East Lothian, and there wasn't an opportunity to go home and be involved in the family farms. So I'd have had to maybe go down to Lincolnshire or go further afield if I wanted to stay in agriculture. But I thought I wanted to do something in East Lothian. So I went down to see the local council in Haddington. I was about 19 at the time, and I knocked on the door and eventually got to see the chaps that run waste services, and they humoured me. And I said, look, I'd like to try this. Could we try this? And anyway, about a year later, they said, right, okay, you're keen. Let's give it a shot. And that was the start.
Wow, incredible. And so, did you plan to start a business? What was the thought? When you were in the farm, were you wanting to begin your own business, start your, Yeah, so I was never farming because, as I say, I was catching lobsters in at college, but yeah. I
wanted to start my own business. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And my dad's a great ideas man. He's had loads of good ideas, and he's inspirational. How he's 75 and still works about 75 hours a week and just loves it. And different ideas every night. He's sending me things. What about this? What about that? And so plenty of encouragement from home. Not everyone thought it was a good idea. A lot of folks said, no. I did work on farms for uncles at the time, and people said, I think you should just get a job, Tommy. No rush, son. But I was like, no, I want to do this. So thankfully, I went to see one of my cousins, Ben, and his dad. They were very enthusiastic. So I said, right, well, I've got this idea. I'll give you half the shares if you come on board with me. And we started it together back in 2002.
And so you say there's 10 sites between here or North Berwick and Ayr. Where else are they then?
So we've got a couple in East Lothian. We've got a couple around Edinburgh, one at Shareholders, one at the airport, so that we can get material out both sides of the city. We've got one halfway along the M8. Right. We've got one north side of Glasgow, one up at Perth. Right. Yeah, just dotted about. Okay. Where there's enough people, you need people to generate the garden cuttings that come into us.
Yes. And then kind of associated to FRM, there's also the product business as well, or what would you call it? The
Caledonian Horticulture is our brand.
Brand.
Yes. So we take in the garden cuttings and we make firewood and we mulches and so forth, and we sell them through our Caledonian Horticulture brand. Back in the day, most of the products would go to farmers as a soil improver.
Yeah.
And that was fine, but there's much more of a margin for us to add value to the products and sell them to the public directly. And it's good, we're trying to come away from using peat in gardens, and a pure botanical compost made from garden cuttings out of the city is, it's a great sustainable product.
Mm-hmm. And where do you sell that product then? What's the route through to the customer?
So we've got a wide range of customers. The Forestry Commission could come to us tomorrow and say they want 10,000 tonnes, and we could say, yep, we can work away at that. A lot of farmers will say maybe take a few hundred tonne or 1,000 tonne here or there. We do a lot of blending with soils. Yeah. So if a field's getting built on, we'll take in the soil and we'll screen out the stone and crush that as an aggregate, and then we'll add in compost and sell that as an organically enhanced topsoil. We sell that to a lot of the builders, merchants, right across Scotland, even down into England. I always feel sorry for the soil going to England. You see it getting loaded on the lorry and think, that bloody bonny Scottish soil. It's going down, it's going to be English by tonight. But, business is business. And then over the years, more and more has gone directly to the gardens. We don't work with the garden centres so much because most of them are tied into big deals with, through big companies that will supply all their wee bags and so forth. But we tend to sell directly to the consumers and to gardeners through our website.
I see. Right. So, and again, forgive me for not knowing this, but so what I would buy through the website is literally kind of a big bag of stuff. Soil, compost, kelpie.
Yeah, so we have a range.
I'm just trying to get my head into...
builder's bags. But we also do small bags.
Okay.
We can do loose loads as well. So if you wanted 20 tonnes delivered in a big truck, dropped in your driveway, we could do that. But it's mainly the builder's bags. So what we call stag bags. It's one of my favourite hobbies is spotting stag bags, because the stag, the monarch of the glen, the big deer, he's our on our logo. So you've got Caledonian Horticulture and the stag. So we say to the drivers, try and drop the bags off so you can see the stags, so people can see whose bag it is when they go past driveways.
Right.
Yeah, and that's been really good for us. I mean, when we first my friend Ian built the shop for us just before COVID. We just thought it was something we should have, and we said, you should have an online shop. But I was like, who buys compost online? Who's ever going to do that? But God, I couldn't have been more wrong. It's been one of the best things we've ever done.
Right.
Wow. And when people buy it, it's extraordinary because we can see. So it'll be like 2 a.m. On a Sunday morning, and someone's buying 3 bulk bags of compost.
Like, what you doing? Yeah, why are you awake?
I'm normally buying kebabs around that time. Okay. So and what was my question? Sorry, go on. You help me.
I was going to say, when you started back, you've got friends, family involved as you sort of set this up, and what strategy other than like this idea that you can charge them at the beginning and charge them at the end? What was there a strategy, or was it just like, let's just go for it and see what happens?
No, I think for us, it's always been about being a manufacturer. Like people say, you're a waste company. No. There's no waste here. So these are resources. And when we first started, we came up with the 4th resource management. And people say, what's that? What's resource management? Now there's the Scottish Resource Management Association. So, we were ahead of our time. But also, because I was catching lobsters as well, and if composting hadn't worked, and we'd called it the composting company, I'd look really silly catching lobsters. So because 4th Resource Management covers a really wide, broad range of things, it was a safe bet.
So at what point then did you say, no more lobsters, I'm going all in on this? Yeah,
it took a year or two. But the big change was when the council started to bring out the dedicated garden bins. So when we first started, previous to us working with the councils, all the garden cuttings were either burnt in people's gardens, or some was home composted, of course. Yeah. But a lot was burnt, or it was rammed in the general bin, and it would go to landfill. There wasn't a composting service before us. we are Scotland's, and there's a few other companies as well, but that grew up at the same sort of time as us. But there was no compost sites before we came along. So initially it was quite small tonnages coming from the civic community sites. So when we first set up, the council said, right, well, we'll put a dedicated skip into, let's say, Seafield, down, and people can put their garden cuttings in there. But landfill tax was starting to grow. So there was a real driver for the councils to try and reduce what they're putting to landfill. So we've always been much, much cheaper. So when the council bring tonnage to us, it's probably between a quarter and a third of the price of disposing it through incineration or landfill. So the councils were keen to work with us, and then they started to bring out the garden bins, and that was what really took off.
When was that then?
So probably around 2004.
Was it?
Yeah, I would think the first. Yeah. We started
the
working
brown bins, basically.
And it was done in phases, and some councils were quicker than others. But we started working with East Lothian in 2002. Edinburgh was late 2002, and we've done their garden tonnage since, and it's a lot of stuff. I mean, Edinburgh will generate over 20,000 tonnes of garden cuttings a year, and we work with 14 councils, so we're doing about 100,000 tonne a year. That's a lot of sticks and blades of grass.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah. So they again, I'm interested in how that gets from garden to you. So they into the brown bins, into the trucks. The trucks then dump it in a big pit somewhere and then ship it out to you, or do they just take it straight to you?
Straight to us. And that's why it's important to have the sites in the right place. So the bin lorries, generally, there is some councils, like over in Ayrshire, there's one where they'll drop it at a central depot and then they'll put it in a big truck and bring it out. But generally, the bin motors will come into us. Yeah. They'll drop the material off, we'll weigh it, and we charge council by the tonne. And then the most important job of all is going through it, and this is done by just spreading it out with a machine and then picking it manually with picking sticks, is taking out the plastic, out the contamination. Because a lot of the bins...
It's done manually?
Yeah, because a lot of the bins will be on the curbside. Someone's walking the dog in the morning and they pick up the poo in the poo bag and think, oh God, I'm not carrying this home. They see someone's garden bin, open the lid, and in it goes. So, and there's a lot of it's not all intentional litter. Like, we'll get dozens and dozens of pairs of secateurs a week across the site, I would think. Because where's my secateurs gone? Oh no, they're away in the garden bin. And, it's all that sort of stuff. So that has to come out. So that's taken out by hand. It's not glamorous. But, I say that I'm sort of chief litter picker because, you need to lead by example. And, whether it's on the street or on the beach or on the compost site, if I see a bit of rubbish, I'm picking it up.
And Tommy, it's interesting. I don't know, have you still got it in your pocket? When you arrived just off camera and we had a chat, you had your pocket was bulging. But tell the viewers what you had.
Well, we were walking in here today and there was a bit of rubbish on the pavement. I picked that up, and then there's another bit. And before I knew it, my pockets were full, and got to the front door. There's a big bin. I said, brilliant. So I'll go and empty that. The bin was locked, so the rubbish had to come into the studio with me. As I said at the start, out like the Wombles. The Wombles of Wimbledon back in the day.
Do you remember the Wombles? It was.
I've heard of them. I didn't.
Yeah.
Uncle Bulgaria.
Absolutely.
Look at that.
Yeah. Good knowledge. And they used to talk about Wimbledon Common picking up all the rubbish. Right, so I'm descended. I can remember my granny picking up rubbish around the village and stuff, and it's just something I've always done. Yeah. And that's led on to projects that were involved in that Scottish coastal cleanup and so forth. So we've probably taken it to an extreme.
Yeah. Tell us about Scottish coastal cleanup.
So. A number of years back, in sort of COVID time, I was walking on the beach and always, help keep Seacliff tidy. And I found a guillemot, and it was caught in a tartan face mask, a reusable tartan face mask. I got caught up, and it obviously starved to death because it'll have been swimming around the Firth of Forth, this thing like a parachute in the water. And I just thought, that's horrendous. Here we are 2 miles from the Bash Rock, which is one of David Attenborough's 10 wildlife wonders of the world. And you've got nature dying entangled in our waste. So I said to my friend, I said, why don't we make a wee video? And it's World Ocean Day tomorrow. We could stick it up saying that we're going to clean Scotland up. We're going to clean the shores. Why don't we say we're going to remove 70% of the rubbish from Scotland's shores in 5 years? We could probably do that, could we? Yeah, we could do that. So we made the spiel up, and I stood there with my dead guillemot in its tartan face mask and with the Bass Rock in the background and filmed it and stuck it online. It was viewed 10,000 times in 24 hours. It went viral, if that's the term. I'm not really sure. Not very into my technology, but I said, we're definitely committed now. There's no going back. So that was a good thing. But then it became apparent that Scotland had a lot more coastline than we understood. It's the longest coastline in Europe, which I didn't know.
Bugger.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also I just presumed that there was a bit of rubbish here and there like there was at Seacliff. But I mean, God, we do a lot on the West Coast, and we'll go to places like these, what we call catch points, where the marine litter has been washed up for decades. And there's this beautiful spot at Heist on Skye. We've been going for years, and the beach is actually, it's 1 metre deep in layers of marine detritus. And as we lift that, we've taken over 8 tons off an 80-metre beach so far. And as we go down through the layers, we're finding I found an old washing up bottle that was, it had its cost still on it, and it was 7.5D or 13.5p. There's 7D and 13.5p, yeah. So it's from the change in old money to new money, which would be the early 70s. So that bottle's 50 years old and looked as good as new because it had been covered up by a net, whereas the top, the stuff's just like confetti where it's broken up. So, that's how the Scottish coastal cleanup began. And we over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, we've developed this incredible band of individuals that work very closely together. And we're led by an amazing lady called Kerry, who she is very much the lead of the Scottish coastal cleanup. And we go around the country supporting community groups. We've even got our own little landing craft, which sounds a bit more fancy than it is. It's made of plastic, but it's still a landing craft. And we can get, half a ton on at a time. We can get into all the little bits and, get up on the beach and put the ramp down and load it up. And it just needs done. So we're trying our best to do it.
Good on you.
And where does that then go? To landfill?
Yeah, so a lot of it, there's some stuff that can get recycled, like in aluminium cans and bits and pieces, but a lot of it is so degraded and brittle. It just needs to go to energy from waste or from landfill. So we work with the councils. Highland Council's pretty good. They'll put skips into some of the harbours. And then we'll take it back there with the boat. The fish farms, salmon farming industry are keen to do their bit, rightly so, because some of it did come from them. So they're very supportive and they'll help remove piles. If we pile up, they'll come in and help remove it with their big boats and take it back, and they let us use their skips as well. So that's very much appreciated. So it's a team effort.
And you do that, the Scottish Coastal Clear Up, that then is done through one of the charities that you set up, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, our charity, Balanced Horizon.
Okay.
And Balanced Horizons, it's an environmental charity with a social twist. And for us, it's about looking at the future and saying, right, we need to get, we need happy, healthy humans if we're going to look after the world. And, the examples I'd use is that you can't expect the inhabitants of the Western Isles to care for the corn creeks if they can't heat their house, or, the African villagers to care for the rhinos if they can't feed their children. So we need to get that balance right. So we're trying to create opportunities for people to come together and do their bit. And so we've got the Scottish Coastal Cleanup. We've also got a project called the Firth Forth Marine Hatchery, which previously focused on lobsters, but going forward is going to try and bring back the native oyster in huge volumes, working with Restoration Forth, which is a coalition looking to re-establish the lost oyster beds in the Firth of Forth off Edinburgh, with Heriot-Watt University and the World Wildlife Fund. The business side and the charity work very closely together. And for instance, for every litre of diesel we burn on any of our sites or any of our delivery lorries, we put 2 pence over to the charity. So over a year, that'll maybe add up to about £10,000. It's not enough to run it, but it helps.
Yes.
Every bag of firewood we sell, we donate a tree. So we'll buy a sapling from one of the tree nurseries, and we will donate that to community groups through our charity as well.
So you say under balanced horizon, then you've got the coast, the sea, and then the land as well. Which one was that again?
The land, yeah. So that's our newest project, and our final. I think it's quite well balanced to have one project on land, one on the shore, and one on the sea. So it's called From Muir to Shore, and so up on the Lammer Muirs, right down to the shore, and it's looking to connect nature. Nature can't thrive in small fragments. We need to help put those corridors in, whether it's hedges or trips of trees or grass margins, and so working with farmers and community groups just to help nature sort of return to East Lothian.
Tell us about the 3 Ps then, the focus on.
So people, planet, and profit, or profit, people, planet. There's no particular order for us, but everything we do from a business point of view is based on not just trying to make money, but also trying to do good for people and for planet. And I think we're very lucky to operate these days because doing good, I genuinely believe, is good for business. It's not just about, how can we, screw down our suppliers on price, or, how can we maximize the profit over there. The triple bottom line, as they call it, is very important to us. And I wouldn't want to be involved in a business that didn't agree with that.
So you've spoken a bit about the business, you've spoken a bit about the planet. So tell us about your people.
So, we have a wonderful team of folk, and most of them are people I've just met. I've bumped into people in all manner of strange situations, and before they know it, they're working with us. So Gary, who's our assistant managing director, he despairs of going on holiday because every time he comes back, I'm like, I met such and such when I was down doing a beach clean, and they've got this story, and they could do with a wee opportunity, and so we use the business to create opportunities for people. It doesn't always work out, but quite often it does. A number of years ago, we considered selling. One of my partners, by that stage there was 3 of us, me, Ben and Alex had a third each of FRM, and Alex was ready for a change, and he used to say, Tommy, talking, we liked our rugby, he said, I've played my 80 minutes and you're just warming up, I'm ready for a change. And Alex has gone, he's got a very successful specialist plant hire business now. And so we were looking at a trade sale, and we accepted an offer from a local company who we do a lot of work with and we got on well with, but we just felt actually the cultural fit wasn't quite right. Nothing wrong with what they were doing, but because we were very focused on the people and the planet aspect, I'd been reading a book on employee ownership at the time, and employee ownership's talked about a lot more now than it was 5 years ago, which is fantastic. Yeah. And there's different forms. Employees can own the shares individually, or it can be owned through a trust, as we know. But we made the decision to look at a form of employee ownership, which I call an employee ownership hybrid. So I said to a lot of the guys that work for us, I said, do you fancy maybe putting a wee investment in? And I said, how about if we set a target of trying between us all to put $1 million, pledge $250,000. If we could do that within a week, we could maybe look at saying thanks, but no thanks to this offer we have on the table to sell the business. And we could remain independent, and we can grow the company and take it in the direction we want to take it in, not just be part of a much bigger organization and go along with wherever they take us. And the response was amazing. It was really humbling. Chaps that are driving machines, driving trucks, working in the office, saying, I think we can do this, and pledging their savings. So it's a big responsibility, for me, saying, okay, because, they're putting their savings in. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll pledge to stay for 20 years, right? Because I'm not going to ask you to put your savings into this business and then 5 years' time see something new and shiny and say, actually, you know what, guys, I'm off. I'm going to go do this. I'll stay for 20 years if you do that. And they did. So we said thanks, but no thanks to the offer. We were a bit short on our funding, so we had to go back to one of the other businesses that had put in and just say, would they come in as an investor with a third of the shares, which they did. And so that's where the sort of hybrid aspects come from, because we have got an investor but we've got a lot of individual shareholders.
And what was the impact on those individual shareholders, the guys who are actually doing the work each day? What involving them in that way?
Well, they really did care before, and that's why we made that call. So do they care more now than they did before? I'm not going to say they did, because they really cared.
Yeah.
But it's got a wonderful feel to it. There's folk that are buying shares per hour, so they can say, I want to put a wee bit of money aside each hour to go towards buying shares.
Yeah.
Or they may say, actually, at the end of this year, I had one dear friend and colleague who's worked alongside me for 20 years, he's past retirement age, but rather than saying he wanted to retire and claim his pension, he decided to cash some of his pension in, buy FRM shares and keep working.
Is that right?
Yeah, amazing.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Amazing. So things like that just fill me with energy, because you know that it's not just yourself that's really trying to push this forward, truly doing it as a team.
Well, you've kind of answered the question I was going to ask, which was, obviously the 3 Ps there, but, I can see that you're very, very passionate about the environment and the planet. And to what extent are the team also sharing that same passion?
We're not a team of environmentalists. Mm-hmm. There are a scattering of environmentalists through the team.
Uh-huh.
There's quite a few of my colleagues that think that, if they put things in the bin and they keep things tidy, that's doing fine. Like even wee things, trying to get everyone to use the recycling properly is a challenge.
Okay.
I'm like, we could all car share, we could all do this, we could all do that. And that's not always particularly well received. So, we're a charity, we're a business and a charity that tries to do the best we can.
Yeah.
But we don't try and force, a green agenda on anybody. A lot of the guys that work with us, I've got, one of dear colleagues and friends has got like big American muscle cars and loves flying around Edinburgh on them. He's not saying, I'm going to cycle to work to save a bit of carbon.
Yeah. And were you going to ask a question?
I was just going to ask around that, because, I think that the whole green flag thing, being environmentally friendly, it's one of those things that kind of gets thrown around as a good thing to have on your website and things like that. But you're probably the most passionate person I've met who I feel like is genuinely excited and passionate about making it happen. What is your opinion of sort of this, what do they call it?
Greenwashing.
Greenwashing. What are your thoughts on that?
There's an awful lot of it. I think over the last month or two, I've seen a few organisations that maybe weren't very committed, using some of the political change just to distance themselves a wee bit from it and go, oh, good, we don't have to worry so much about that anymore. And it's frustrating, but it's not just with the environmental bit, it's also with the people bit. I'll speak to a lot of folk and they'll say, I work for such and such a company and, this happened to me, this is how they treated me. And I say, oh God, that's terrible. And they've got all these wonderful policies and they'll say that they're all about their people. But actually when it comes down to it, they're really more about their profit. We genuinely mean what it says. We're gonna try and make a difference.
And you kind of mentioned it earlier on in the conversation about almost, you sound like you give people an opportunity. You meet people and you try and make an opportunity for them. Can you give us some examples of that, or kind of expand on that? Because I liked it. I liked where you were going with it.
Oh, examples. Yeah, absolutely. So, right. So, I was cutting a tree up in the woods a few months ago and I saw a chap walk by and I got chatting to him and, before I know, a great conversation about nature. I said, we'll go and get a hot drink. And, before you know it, he's working away with me. A good one recently, put my phone on silent, just trying to get a bit of rest, and woke up in the morning, turned it on, and beep, beep, beep. It was a Sunday. Oh God, what's going on? Chaos. We couldn't get out of Seacliff. Someone had crashed their van across the road. They hit ice, and it blocked the road. They hit their head. They'd wandered off home, and eventually we tracked this guy down. And poor chap had a nightmare. He'd lost his job recently. He had he was very proud of his van, and it had just got written off. He had 2 young kids, and so before I knew, I'd never met him, but I ended up lending him a vehicle and, gave him a job, and he's wanting to start his own little business, which is great. And I was like, well, come and work for us for a couple of months, and then we'll be able to give you a bit of work, and it'll work for everybody. So it's just that sort of thing. Some people do get employed through adverts and the normal channels. But I'm not really involved in that. Everyone that joins the team, if anything to do with me, is through some sort of story. Which keeps life much more interesting.
You seem very hands-on as well within your business.
Yes and no. I mean, like back in the day when we first started, Alex and I were, operating all the machines and making all the compost ourselves. I've not used a shredder for quite some years, and so I could still probably jump in a digger and move it from A to B, but not, so I'm hands-on in terms of especially the charitable side, the litter picking. I don't know how many bits of rubbish I pick up, but I'm not that hands-on in terms of actually making the compost anymore, because there's a lot of guys that are a lot better at it than me.
Aye. So what's your role in the business now then? 'Cause I know you've got a number of businesses, and I think you said that FRM was the main focus, I guess. Is that right? But what's your main kind of role?
Yeah, I think what I said was Ephraim pays my salary. So
it needs
to be my main focus. Otherwise, the board might be like, Tommy, come on. And I've got an uncle, David, who was high up in the military, and then he went on to run the Ember Tattoo. And every time I see him, he's like, Tommy, what are your 5 things? And apparently in military history, stretching right back to the time of the Romans, you would have 5. So if you were a commanding officer, you'd have 5 legions under you, or 5 squadrons or whatever, never more. Sometimes 6 maybe, but he makes me count them out, and there's always far too many. So I'm trying not to have new projects. My wife banned me actually at one point. We lost track of how many businesses we had, and she said, Tommy, you're not allowed any more. And then my brother had the idea to start the oat milk business. So I got quite involved, and initially for a long time I didn't have any shares because I wasn't allowed any. Thankfully I've recently rectified that, and now I have a stake.
Good. Tell us about that then.
The oats. So my brother Robbie and I were both allergic to cow's milk when we were young. We used to get a bit of eczema. We grew out of it as teenagers, but we used to have to drink soy milk, very sweet and horrible. And so because we've got the farming side, we're very fortunate that a bit of ground came our way from our granddad, and my uncle was farming it, and he gave it back about, 9-10 years ago. He said, it's very heavy land. He said, it's very hard to make it pay. You lads can see how you get on. So we tried different crops, wheat, barley, rye, beans, grass. Didn't really make any headway. Normally end up with less money at the end of the harvest than we started with in the spring. So my brother said, what could we do to add value? He said, what about oat milk? And that's a good idea. So we talk to people, and people look at us funny and say, goat milk, where are you going to keep the goats? And you're like, no goats, it's oats. And then they look at you even more puzzled. How do you milk an oat? And, but now everyone knows about oat milk. It's a big thing. Yeah. So we thought, right, let's have a crack at that. And Lorna says, well, you're not involved, Tommy. But end up being very involved, just not having the shares. And it's been a long, winding road. We've got a great team involved with the oat milk now, and it's really making headway. Edinburgh University recently chucked Oatly out of all their cafes and are using Bros. So Bros is the name of our oat milk. And that's because back in the day, our ancestors in the farmhouse kitchens, like my great granny and so forth, would make a Bros, which would be out of oats and ice and cold water and a bit of honey maybe, and it would be taken out to the workers in the fields at harvest on hot days to quench their thirst and rehydrate them. Back in the days, the horses before air-conditioned tractor cabs. And so when we were thinking about the oat milk idea, and I know there'll be people listening today, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be calling it oat milk, oat drink. The dairy farmers, if there's any dairy farmers listening, I'm really sorry. I know it's not technically milk, but so my dad said, what about Bros? Granny used to make a Bros, and so we went for that.
And how would you spell Bros then for anyone listening to this?
Brose.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So that was the name of the old drink.
Yeah.
Great.
Please don't ask me to spell anything else. I still can't even spell the word entrepreneur. People say, Tommy, you're an entrepreneur. I say, I can't spell it. The old dyslexia kicking in. But I can spell bros.
No, perfect. Great.
So yeah, bros, we've got our original bros. We've got the barista for the coffees and then this most incredible chocolate bros, which I'm dangerously addicted to.
It is very good. Have you had it?
No, but I'm going to have to go and buy it.
You go to Margiotta's and get it. That's one.
Indeed, yes.
But it's very good.
All right.
I've never had oat milk. It was the first time I ever had oat milk. I had it with Josh, and I was like, "Wow, this is delicious." And you can drink a lot of it, man.
Oh, indeed, yeah.
The chocolate one is great.
Thank you. Glad you like it. And it's in returnable glass bottles. We are having to look at, to allow the business to expand into some plastic bottles, unfortunately, because a lot of customers saying that we love the product, but only if it's in plastic. But at the last number of years, it's all been returnable glass. So the bottles come back to the oat milk factory down at the Mart in East Linton. They get washed, and the great team there will refill them and send them back out again.
How does that work?
Just like the old days.
No, sorry.
Like when you got your milk.
How would I?
So, well, if you go to Margot, you buy your bottle. You pay a wee bit extra to get the bottle.
Yeah.
And that's built into the price. And then when you finished with that, and you can go back and hand that bottle back.
Oh, right. Like you do with the old Iron Brew bottles. Remember
absolutely,
that?
Yeah. The bar bottles. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But no money tends to change hands. It tends to be that you swap it back for your next bottle.
Okay.
And that's worked fine, but it has limited the ability to, from a logistical point of view, to get out to customers further afield.
Amazing. Tommy, you spoke about being committed for 20 years. So you're in, not many years in to that 20.
This year, 6.
6. Okay. So you've still got 14 years left. When you, if you leave in your 14 years time, where do you see the business or all the businesses being? What would the dream be?
Well, the only way I would leave is because I've died.
Okay.
And, and if I do die, I hope the FM could compost me because it's a big thing in America. Like getting burned. I don't want to be cremated. That uses a lot of fuel to cremate somebody. Yeah. I would far rather be composted. So, they're getting big in a place like Seattle. So, I generally not going anywhere.
Right, so that's how you'll go out. You'll go through the plant, and then you'll be out on a.
Well, then I'll be planted maybe with some oak trees. Make some compost and then plant me with an oak tree.
Oak tree, and then you'll end up in a bottle.
In a bottle.
Oat milk.
Not an oat tree, an oak tree.
An oak tree. I thought you said oat.
I was like, I don't think oats
I thought you just wanted to kind of exist forever in your own circular economy.
God, you'd be putting people off. Just for absolute clarity, there's no dead people in Bros. No, an oak. I want to be planted with an oak under an oak tree.
Right, got
an acorn. An acorn. Yes, yeah.
I was like, what are you talking about?
Brilliant.
Tommy, we ask everyone, what is your guiding principle in business?
Quite simple. Try and do good and prosper. I think, if you can try your best, to be fair, to give others the opportunity and not be greedy, then, I'm not saying it's karma or whatever, but, hopefully, that'll work out okay.
Amazing. Tommy, thank you so much for coming on, sharing a bit your story, and we wish you all the luck in the future.
Thank you very, very much for inviting me here today.